What if I told you that Madeleine McCann's kidnapper made a fatal mistake and no one noticed? A detail that was right in front of everyone all this time, ignored by the authorities, could be the key to solving one of the world's greatest criminal mysteries. Today, we will analyze this flaw that may have gone unnoticed for 17 years and reveal what it means for the case. For years, we believed that Madeleine McCann's kidnapper planned everything in minute detail. A perfect crime, without traces, without mistakes. But what if that's not true? What if a slip-up made that night is the missing key to unraveling this mystery? The investigation has gone through several twists and turns. Suspects have been interrogated, clues analyzed, but one crucial detail was forgotten, ignored for years. Now, a new analysis suggests that the kidnapper wasn't as careful as he seemed. He made a mistake, something so obvious that it went unnoticed by investigators and the public. The most frightening part? This flaw was always there, hidden in the reports, testimonies, and analyzed images. A small detail, but one that can completely change how we understand this case. If this clue is real, it not only could indicate who was really behind the disappearance, but also raises another question. Why was this mistake ignored? Was there a failure in the investigation, disinterest, or something deeper that prevented this clue from being pursued? The truth might be closer than we think, but is there still time to use it? From the beginning, the official story of the case was simple. Someone entered the apartment and took Madeleine without leaving any traces. But what if this version was never correct? There is a detail in this crime that defies logic. How did a kidnapper manage to act so quickly, without being seen, without making a single mistake? The answer might lie in something that went unnoticed for years. Witnesses reported seeing a man carrying a child on the night of the disappearance. This information was recorded, but soon dismissed. The Portuguese police believed it was unrelated to the case. But what if this was the biggest oversight in the investigation? Now, with new technologies and a detailed review of the testimonies, a connection has emerged that could change everything. The man seen that night might not only be involved, but may have left a clear trace of his mistake. And the most intriguing part? This detail has been in the archives since day one. It was always there, accessible to anyone who knew where to look, but no one looked. If this new analysis is correct, it means the crime wasn't as perfect as we thought. The kidnapper may have made a slip-up that for years was treated as irrelevant. Can this clue still be used to reach an answer? Or is it too late to correct this mistake? The biggest problem with this case was never the lack of clues, but the errors in how they were analyzed. From the start, the investigation followed wrong paths, dismissed crucial information, and made decisions that may have cost the chance to uncover the truth. And among all the mistakes, one stands out. Madeleine McCann's kidnapper may have left a visible trail, but the police ignored it. Witnesses gave precise descriptions, indicated suspicious behaviors, reported unusual movements in the area in the days prior. But none of this was taken seriously. If this clue had been treated as a priority, the case could have had a completely different outcome. Instead, the focus of the investigation shifted, leading to suspicions against Madeleine's own parents, diverting attention from what really mattered. Now, experts have revisited this information and realized the magnitude of the error. The suspect who could have been identified at the time went unnoticed. But what if there is still a way to trace this connection? Today, technologies like facial recognition and advanced DNA analysis can do what was not possible in 2007. The question is there interest in using these resources to correct past mistakes? If the police decide to look at this clue with the seriousness it should have had from the beginning, this could be the moment to rewrite the history of the case. But after so much time, is anyone still willing to chase the truth? Imagine the scene. May 3rd, 2007 night. While tourists enjoyed the calmness of the resort in Praia da Luz, Portugal, a man walked through the narrow streets carrying a child in his arms. The girl was still, her head resting on his shoulder. At a glance, one might think he was a father returning home with his sleeping daughter, but he wasn't. A witness saw this scene and was puzzled. Something didn't seem right. The man walked quickly, looked around as if he was nervous. He followed a path that led away from the resort towards a less crowded area. Later, this same witness described the man to the police, gave details of what he saw, but the information was treated. New analyses of the case, this same clue comes to light again. Why? Because the behavior of this man doesn't align with the version of a well-planned kidnapping. If he were prepared, he would have a car waiting, a defined route, everything timed to avoid drawing attention. But no, he was on foot, seemed to be improvising, as if something had gone out of control. And here is the strangest detail. What happened at the exact moment he left the apartment with Madeleine? Everything indicates that he had to make a quick decision without planning. Did something unexpected happen inside the room? A noise? A movement in the corridor? Whatever it was, it means the crime may not have been as meticulous as we believe. The kidnapper might have made a mistake, a detail that went unnoticed at the time, but could be the key to reopening this investigation. If this assumption is true, the inevitable question is, what was the kidnapper's mistake? What did he leave behind? Clues might be in small details that were ignored. Footprints, fabric traces, even information that seemed disconnected at the time. During the initial investigation, specialists tried to reconstruct the most probable route the kidnapper took, but there were men in the area long before the estimated time of the kidnapping. Others pointed to strange movements near the apartment days before. The most terrifying possibility? Maybe the kidnapper wasn't alone. This would explain why he seemed to act on the fly. What if there was a change of plans? An unforeseen event that forced the execution of the crime differently than planned? There is another detail that strengthens this hypothesis. Many years later, the German police pointed to Christian Bruckner as one of the main suspects, a man with a history of violent crimes against children. But would he act alone? Would he have the confidence to enter a crowded place without any support? Whoever is responsible, one thing is clear: the investigation failed to connect the dots from the very beginning. If this clue had been taken seriously, maybe we would have an answer. And now comes the most difficult question. Is there still time to correct this mistake? If this clue is revisited, will it be possible to retrace the kidnapper's path and finally discover what happened that night? The man walked hurriedly down the dark street, his steps firm but his breathing heavy. He looked back, trying to appear natural, but anyone paying attention would notice something was wrong. The child in his arms didn't move. The witness who saw this scene that night never forgot it. The tense look, the hurry, the absolute silence of the girl. But at the time, the police did not give it due attention. The first days of the investigation were chaotic. Too much information, little direction. Reports like this were buried among hundreds of loose clues. And this is where the fatal mistake comes in. When the investigators finally considered this report, something essential had already been lost: the kidnapper's escape route. The first minutes after the crime are crucial, and any trace along the way could have been analyzed. Footprints, security cameras, even witnesses who might have seen something else. But none of this was done in time. Reconstructing the route of that man only began when it was already too late. The focus was on the room, on what happened inside, while the true trail of the criminal disappeared outside. But what if now, years later, this mistake could be corrected? And if, with the right tools, we could reconstruct that night and identify who he was? The answer might lie in technology that didn't exist at the time, a technology that today has helped solve cold cases that seemed impossible to crack. Genetic genealogy has already identified criminals who went decades unpunished. The Golden State Killer, one of the most infamous cases in the United States, was captured after more than 40 years, all thanks to a small DNA trace that, at the time of the crime, meant nothing. But today, with new techniques, it was the key piece for his arrest. What if the same could happen here? The man who carried Madeleine that night may have left something behind: a strand of hair, a fingerprint on an overlooked surface, a fabric fiber that can now be analyzed with a level of precision unimaginable in 2007. With the digitization of the investigation files, these traces can finally be reviewed with a new perspective. But there is a problem. For this to happen, the authorities need to act. The issue is not just whether technology can help, but whether there is real interest in using it. Are there forces that would prefer this case to remain unsolved? If this technology is applied, what can be discovered? Can the kidnapper's face finally be revealed? Or is something bigger being hidden? The silence in the investigation room was almost suffocating. In front of the screen, the specialists analyzed the new data, cross-referencing information that, for years, seemed to lead nowhere. But now, with technological advances, the story could change. A sample forgotten for years had been re-examined. Environmental DNA allowed for the recovery of genetic fragments on surfaces where nothing useful was previously believed to exist. What was once just an unidentified trace could now be compared to global databases. The investigator in charge of the analysis pressed his lips together, leaning back in his chair. There was a match, not a complete identity, but a connection, a partial genetic profile linked to a family that, up to that moment, had never been mentioned in the investigation. The name that emerged was not of an old suspect, nor someone already on the police radar. If confirmed, this would mean that Madeleine McCann's kidnapper could be closer to being identified than ever before. But the question now was what to do with this information. Reopening the case would mean exposing past mistakes, confronting powerful interests, and perhaps unearthing truths that many would prefer to keep buried. Time has erased memories and obscured evidence, but it has also brought tools that once seemed. The biggest question is not just who was involved, but whether justice will finally be served. The truth does not disappear. It can be ignored, suppressed, even distorted, but it never ceases to exist. And now, with a new concrete clue, the Madeleine McCann case may be about to take an unexpected turn. If environmental DNA can indeed be traced to a suspect, it means a historical turnaround is about to happen. But will the authorities have the courage to follow this trail to the end? Or will the truth be pushed into oblivion once more? Madeleine's story has had many versions, many promises, and few answers. But with this new discovery, a real chance emerges to finally solve one of the world's most impactful mysteries. The silence surrounding this case never meant the absence of answers. It meant fear. Fear of what could be found if the right questions were asked. For years, Madeleine McCann's disappearance was treated as one of the world's greatest criminal mysteries. But what happens when such a high-profile case relies more on the lack of answers than on the search for them? Now, with technology allowing for more advanced analyses, an essential question arises. Is there even a real desire to solve this mystery, or do some answers bother more than the unknown itself? Because let's be honest, this case has become much more than an investigation. It has become a phenomenon, a mystery that captures the attention of millions, generates theories, discussions, and maintains an endless flow of speculation. And this raises an uncomfortable question. Is there someone who prefers the questions to remain unanswered? This mistake, this detail that went unnoticed for so long, could be the key to unlocking a series of events that were never properly explored. It could expose flaws in the investigation, dismantle hypotheses that once seemed definitive, and, most importantly, it could indicate who benefited from this prolonged silence. The police ignored an essential clue, and now when science can finally fill in these gaps, it remains to be seen whether this will be enough for the truth to be revealed, or if it will be just another missing piece in a puzzle that never seems to complete. The truth is that over the years, what seemed to be a simple quest for justice has become a minefield of contradictions. Inconsistent statements, investigation failures, suspects dismissed without convincing explanations. All of this has contributed to turning this case into something much more complex than it should be. But now, faced with a new possibility for analysis, this complexity can finally begin to unravel. But do the authorities really want to solve this case? Or are there forces working to keep the doubt lingering? Because when a mystery becomes too big, solving it might not be so interesting after all for some involved parties. Who benefits from the uncertainty? Who gains when a story never reaches its end? And what if Madeleine McCann isn't the only case where such an obvious mistake was ignored? What if there are other investigations that could be solved with a single piece that was discarded at the time? And what if this forgotten clue is just one among many that were left behind in the name of convenience or neglect? Now the question remains, does anyone really have the interest in closing this case, or does the truth bother too much? If what we've discovered so far has shown us anything, it's that this mistake shouldn't have been forgotten. But can it still make a difference so many years later? If you've made it this far, I want to hear your opinion. Do you believe this mistake can really change the course of the investigation? Or is it already too late to rewrite this story? Comment, "I am for the truth," so I know you've stayed with me until the end. And don't leave now, because in the next video, we will talk about another case surrounded by failures, mysteries, and omissions that perhaps should never have happened. Click here and discover what else might be hidden.